So today we're doing a recipe from Duff Bakes, Think and Bake Like a Pro at Home by Duff Goldman and Sarah Gonzalez, copyright 2015. We're doing the vanilla birthday cake. It's for my brother-in-law's birthday party, his surprise birthday party. So I'll be doing the vanilla birthday cake, and then I will be doing a red velvet cake at some point also, with a cream cheese frosting. I'm hoping to do a video on decorating that also, but they will be broken up into multiple videos. This is one of my newest cookbooks, and I somehow have been using it the most recently, so I guess that's a good review for the cookbook. I'm trying something new where I actually lay out all my ingredients, so hopefully this will be less of a hot mess. I am going to go ahead and preheat the oven. We need to preheat it to 350. Okay, we are preheating. So our next step is going to be prepping the cake pans. Duff says to grease them with cooking spray and then put parchment paper in them. I do not have cooking spray or parchment paper because all the other recipes I read out of this cookbook did the oil and flour method. So we're going to do the oil and flour method. Other fun fact, this is supposed to make 2 9-inch round cakes. I do not have 2 9-inch round cake pans, so we will be using one of my spring-loaded pans, and I think this is about 10 inches, I think. I wouldn't quote me on that. And then this little silicone guy. The end goal is to make this like a tombstone shape. So what I'm going to do is bake the 4 cakes, more or less, and then kind of shape and carve them into what I need. To prepping this, I will be using a little bit of vegetable oil in there. I'm just putting like not a lot, less than a tablespoon, more than a teaspoon. So normally I would use a paper towel to spread the oil out in here, but I am out of paper towels, so I'm going to sacrifice one of my washcloths. It's clean. This silicone one is a little harder to do because it has grooves in the bottom. If you have a cake pan that's a little difficult like that, you might have to add more oil. With this being silicone, I'm not as concerned about it since it's so flexible. I can kind of just pop the cake out. So next step is to take all-purpose flour and just kind of measure with your heart. You're just going to put a little bit in there, and then you're just going to kind of do that motion and make sure it's evenly covered, and tap it down a little bit so that you don't get giant clumps of flour in there. This extra flour, since I have 2 cake pans, I'm just going to pour it in there. Make sure you get all the extra out. You want a nice even coating in there so that you don't get flour chunks on your cake. I'm going to do like the same thing in this one. This one is going to be like pretty much impossible to not get flour chunks in with how the bottom is. So if you would like to like and subscribe, share this video, get my subscriber count up, you can provide me with new pans or concert tickets, depending on how I feel that day. All right, so we're pretty much covered in here. I'm going to toss the rest of this flour. Same kind of deal, tap the extra out over the trash can. So that's what this one looks like. Like I said, you're going to have like that extra on the bottom just because of the diamond pattern. This cake is going to be more or less used to fill holes in my design. I have high hopes of my carving abilities, so hopefully it turns out. Okay, our 2 cake pans are prepped. and put to the side. I'm going to put away my flour because we are done with that for now. All right, oven is preheated. We need to start adding stuff to the mixer. Duff said to make sure that your mixer has its paddle attachment on, so that is geared up and ready to go. All right, so we need to cream the butter and sugar together for about 2 minutes or until light and fluffy. So he says that we need a stick and a half of butter softened. It's been sitting at room temperature for about an hour. I would think that is soft enough, hopefully. Stick and a half of butter in, and then sugar, we need a cup and a half. Same deal, just kind of get an even spoonful. All right, there's our half. Oozy. Stop. All right, I'm gonna finish the sugar, then remove her. There's our cup. I'm gonna wash my hands. All right, so now that Lucy is done interrupting, we have our cup and a half of sugar with our 1.5 sticks of butter in the bowl. I'll set those to the side in case I need to use them again. And he says to mix this together for about 2 minutes until it's light and fluffy. So I'll just kind of guess what 2 minutes is. Or until I think it is light and fluffy enough. I'm doing like a low medium speed for now. He doesn't say how aggressively to beat it or not, so I'm gonna up it to more of a true medium here. Like I said, Duff just said for about 2 minutes until it's light and fluffy. I think it's light and fluffy, but I know it has not been 2 minutes. But once again, Duff did not include a speed in which to beat this at, so I'll give it another minute here so that we are following the instructions as closely as possible. All right, so that should be about 2 minutes, so we'll turn this off here. All right, I'm just gonna scrape some of the extra off the paddle. We're gonna be mixing stuff in here again shortly. All right, so that's what we're sitting at right now with the sugar and butter. I don't know, I guess that's light and fluffy. All right, he said 2 extra large eggs plus 3 egg whites. I only have large eggs. If we were adding more eggs, I would just add an extra egg, I think is the way to go about that. But since it's only 2 eggs, I don't want this cake to accidentally become like a quiche. So we're just gonna stick with this egg quantity with large eggs and hope it works out. All right, here are our eggs. He wants us to use the egg whites out of 3 and then whole 2 eggs. They have been sitting out for, I think, in about an hour. They still feel a little cool. He wants them room temperature, but leaving eggs out for a while makes me a little bit nervous. So we're gonna just go with it as is. Add eggs 1 at a time while beating. All right, I'm gonna turn it on and then kind of just pour this egg in. All right, so I just added 1 egg in. He said to beat after each egg, adding the eggs in slowly. So as it's going, I'll crack the next egg and turn this up a little bit. Once again, he did not say how fast I needed to beat this at. So I'm just doing about a medium speed and letting the egg mix in really well, and then I'll add the next one. All right, our 2 full eggs are in. So we will be doing the egg whites next. I'm gonna get a bowl to put the yolks in so I can save them and do something else with them later. Okay, so there's my little yolk bowl. This is how my grandma taught me how to get egg whites, is to use the shells and just kind of go back and forth and get the whites out. You're probably not going to be able to get all of the whites doing this back and forth method, but you'll get most of them. So I'm going to put the yolk into that standby bowl and I'll do something with them later. I'm going to turn this down while we get the whites. For the yolks, I usually make my husband like breakfast burritos because it's cheaper than buying them and they're not that difficult to make. So I'll probably just throw the yolks into there. Here are our 3 egg whites. Oop. Into the bowl, we're going to let those mix in good. I'm going to put my yolks in the fridge so I can use them later. And then I'm going to wash my hands so I don't get salmonella or E. coli or whatever the fuck else chickens can give you. All right, so they are looking in pretty good. All right, Duff said to scrape the sides as you go. So I'm doing that right now. I'd say definitely follow that step because they are sticking to the sides pretty well, the butter sugar mixture. So to make sure it's well incorporated, you need to definitely follow that step. All right, I'll give it another quick mix here. Okay, I went ahead and turned off the mixer because the egg, sugar, butter are all pretty well mixed together while I measure the vanilla and add it in. And then he does actually use a speed this time. So after the vanilla goes in, we're going to beat it on medium-high for about 1 minute. He says to use pure vanilla extract, but I don't have pure vanilla money, so we're using imitation vanilla flavor. There's 1, 2, and then a quarter. So now we will be beating this for 1 minute on medium-high. Okay, we need to whisk together in a medium bowl flour, baking powder, and salt. Normally, I would recommend doing it while this is going, but I'm not that good at multitasking, so I went ahead and turned this off, and we're going to do that next step now. All right, so the flour we are using is cake flour. This is the only brand I can find in the middle of Iowa. Okay, I'm going to recycle the measuring cup that I used from the sugar. I do not want to contaminate my cake flour with sugar, so I have a spoon. I'm just going to scoop with the spoon into the cup so I do not get sugar into my cake flour. This method is proving to be a little messier than I would like. Cake flour is, I believe, finer than all-purpose flour. It will get everywhere. It's a little closer to powdered sugar. I think this method I'm using also kind of stops it from compacting, and you would like it to be looser while you are measuring it so that you do not use too much flour. I've been trying to even these cups off. 1 more cup to go. I have about another cup in here, I believe. It's just all settled at the bottom. 3 cups of cake flour. Since cake flour does have that super powdery, almost powdered sugar consistency, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit here so I get less of it everywhere. I know TV makes it look like baking isn't super messy, but that's how you know it's all fake, because I have never baked anything without getting the ingredients everywhere. All right, so that's cleaned up a little bit. Okay, I have my cake flour here. I need to add baking powder to it. I need 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon. And then I need to add kosher salt, which I actually bought and have this time. And we need 3/4 of a teaspoon of that. So 1 teaspoon and then 1 tablespoon. So done with baking powder. Next is kosher salt. So 3/4 of a tablespoon. I'm just going to take the lid off. It'll make it easier. Pretty sure if we use 1/4 of a teaspoon 3 times, that equals 3/4 of a teaspoon. Hopefully. So we're going to do that. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Great. Hope that was correct. Okay, so I need to whisk those ingredients together. So I'm going to do that while I read the next instruction. Okay, so that's whisked together. I now need to get a cup of milk, so I'll do that. All right, 1 cup milk. I'm using Anderson and Erickson's whole milk. A little shy. Fun fact, apparently Fairway sells it cheaper than Walmart, just so everybody knows. Perfect, 1 cup. So how the instructions say to add it is to mix part of the flour in. So I'm thinking about half of the flour, then put the milk in, and then put the rest of the flour in, making sure to stop and scrape the sides. So I am going to go ahead and try and do that. So I'll put about I think that's about half of that in. I'll let that mix up. Maybe start it slow so flour doesn't fly everywhere. Okay, so it's been mixing for a little bit. I do have a lot of flour on the sides and some gunk kind of stuck up on the mixer. So I'm going to go ahead and knock all that off the paddle and then give the sides a quick scrape here. I'm assuming why he's adding it in different parts is so that we can make sure it's really well incorporated in between so that we don't have chunks at the end. So I'm going to let that mix a little bit longer just to make sure it's incorporated really well. All right, we're looking pretty good here. I'm going to scrape it down real quick and then add the milk. All right, 1 cup of milk. 1 cup of milk in. So I'm gonna mix that in, turning it on slowly so I don't splash milk everywhere. All right, it's starting to mix pretty well. So I'm gonna turn that up a little bit, maybe not too much. Let it mix in a little bit better. All right, the milk is really well mixed. So I'm going to scrape the edges again and then scrape the paddle a little bit too so it doesn't get clumpy on there. It just kind of clumps a little bit above the water line on the paddle. So scrape that off. All right, and then I'm going to add the rest of the flour mixture in. Oop. All right, that's all in. I'm going to turn the mixer on slowly so I don't blow flour everywhere and let that mix slow for a while. Okay, I've turned it up some now that I'm out of risk of the flour blowing up into my face or getting everywhere around the mixer. All right, I'm going to turn it off for a second and then scrape the edges again. Okay, we are looking pretty well mixed together. I'm just going to scrape the extra batter off of my paddle here. All right, and I will remove the paddle. Maybe, there we go. Yeah, I do believe it is mixed pretty well. So the last step here is half a cup of sprinkles. All right, so half a cup of sprinkles here. I got one of the big containers from Walmart because I had a hard time visualizing how much a half a cup is when it's in a container. I'm trying to make this pretty even, but I don't know that this affects the consistency as much or the taste as much as other flavors. So that's what we're at. I think that's pretty good. He does not want you to mix this in with the mixer. So after you're done mixing all the other ingredients, add this half a cup of sprinkles in last. All right, now we are going to hand fold in these sprinkles. I assume the goal is to just kind of evenly get them a light mix through. I would guess he doesn't want you to mix them in while you're using the mixer so you don't break the sprinkles. Also, there's a lot of dye on sprinkles and it will kind of run all over your cake. I would guess that that problem gets worse when the paddle is hitting against them and breaking off the chunks of coloring on the outside. All right, I think we are pretty well mixed in. Now we just need to add to our cake pans. Okay, our sprinkles are mixed in, so it's time to put them into our cake pans. My springed side cake pan, I have a little bit of trust issues with just because it's old. I don't know that it's actually ever leaked on me, but since it's an older pan, I just put a little bit of foil on the bottom. So if it does leak, it leaks into the foil and not my oven. Yep, the foil is on there, so I just I do a little fold over on the top, but I don't want a ton of foil in there because I don't want it actually getting into the cake. I don't know that it would affect it any. It's just a personal choice. And like I said, I don't think the cake pan actually needs it. I'm just worried that if I don't do it, it will leak all over my oven. Okay, so it also says to spread it evenly between 2 cake pans of the same size, which we are not doing. How I do this usually is just pour a little bit into there and then a little bit into there and decide who gets more. Make sure that it's covering the cake pans pretty well. Okay, a little bit more there. Okay, so his baking instructions are assuming that you are using 2 cake pans of the same size. He has them cooking for 25 to 30 minutes. Since I'm using 2 very different sizes and one is quite a bit smaller, I start off at about 15 minutes and kind of check on them and then add 5 to 10 minutes as they cook, kind of guessing how I think they're coming along. I do have toothpicks, so I'll toothpick check them randomly, but I'm going to put these in the oven and then we'll see how they turn out and how much time it takes in a little bit. Okay, so our cakes have come out of the oven. The end cooking time ended up being 30 minutes for this one and 40 minutes for this one. Okay, so the cakes have been cooling for about 15 minutes at this point. Duff says to use a wire cooling rack. I do not have one. I just put them on the stove burners to cool. The idea of a cooling rack, I believe, is to get airflow all the way around the cake so that there is more surface area to kind of cool off. Yep, so I don't have a cooling rack, so we didn't do that. This one has been cooling longer just because I took it out of the oven first. He says to take them out of the forms and let them keep cooling on the cooling rack. Like I said, I do not have a cooling rack, so we will not be doing that. For the little one, I'm using a flat plate that I covered with plastic wrap so it doesn't stick to it. It will stick to it. But this one is just kind of my filler cake. I'll most likely be kind of cutting this one up completely to kind of make this big one into the shape that I want. Hopefully this plan will work out. So let's do this one. Since this is silicone, the cake does move quite a bit. So I just kind of go around in a circle and kind of like pinch it a little bit so that it loosens that cake up. I don't want to do it a ton because I don't want the cake to crack. And then I just kind of it over just like that. It mostly came out. There's a few edges, but like I said, I'm using this as more of a filler. So hopefully it's fine. Since this is still warm, there will be condensation on the bottom and it will stick. Thus, the plastic wrap is very important if you don't have a cooling rack to put it on. If you did have a cooling rack, there wouldn't be any of that heat trapped in there to trap moisture and kind of make the bottom soggy. Okay, so what I'm doing now is making my cooling rack for this big cake. What I've done is taken one of these broiling pans. It came with the house, with the oven that came with the house. It has a big basin that goes under it. It's the closest thing I have that has ventilation. So the high points have slits in them. So what I'm pretty much doing is I've taped the aluminum foil on here so it stays tight. I want to avoid the cake going into the divots as much as possible. That way it doesn't like crack or do anything weird. So that's why I have the foil taped. So now what I'm doing is I'm going along with a knife and feeling in the divots, kind of where the holes are. I want to do it from the side the cake's going to be on, because I want all the little foil bits to kind of go to the bottom so that they don't get stuck on the cake. When you're using foil, I mean, you do run that risk, especially if you're stabbing a bunch of little holes into it. So before I decorate the cake, I will be making sure that I didn't get any foil on it. So I'm kind of guessing where the cake will be. So I've done the middle holes. I haven't done everything. I want the foil to still kind of be structural and kind of hold its strength over where these valleys are so the cake doesn't sag. With this guy, we're going to pop the sides off. I expand the ring as far as I can and then kind of gently lift it off of there. All right, so the bottom's still a bit warm. So what I'm going to do is take the tray, how I want the cake to land on it, so I don't have to touch the metal sheet as much. And then I will get my hand under the sheet and flip it like that. And ideally, it would not be doing this. I'm going to get a knife and see if we can convince it to leave. So if that method would have worked, we would not have this right now. So let me take my knife here. I'm using a butter knife. And I'm kind of just using the flat edge to kind of go through and hopefully loosen this cake off. I'm trying to hold it as tight to the top as I can so I don't shave off a ton of this cake. Perfect. There we go. Cake is out. I have the metal pan off of it. There she is. Now we're going to set her off to the side to cool. I'm going to let them cool overnight because you don't want a frost hot cake. The frosting will just melt off of them. And I have 2 more cakes to make. So I'll set these off to the side and we'll see them again when it's time to decorate.